Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to join us for this webinar, Strengthening Your Digital Fortress. This will be a panel discussion with ASMGi, KnowBe4, and BluSapphire. We have a terrific session lined up here with some fantastic panelists here, very knowledgeable in the field of cybersecurity. And without further delay, we're going to get started here. So Steve Roesing, please take it away.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Thanks all of you for attending today. I appreciate you sharing your time. We have a great topic and a great panel. Should be a great discussion. So I'll go ahead and get started. So the panel today, Rosa and Kiran, thanks for being here. I'm Steve Roesing, President and CEO of ASMGi. We're a full stack technology company. It's Doug Twister. Anyway, it's what that means is basically we get involved in infrastructure, cybersecurity, and software development. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you want to ask. Rosa and Kiran, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves? Start with you, Rosa. You're on mute. You're muted.
There we go. Hi, my name is Rosa Smothers. I'm Senior Vice President of Cyber Operations at KnowBe4. I've been working in cybersecurity for over 20 years. I spent over a decade at the Central Intelligence Agency as a cyber threat analyst and a technical intelligence officer. So I bring a lot of those skill sets and that background to bear in my work there at KnowBe4.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Rosa. Really appreciate it. Go ahead, Kiran.
Hi, I'm Kiran Vangaveti. 25 years in IT, last 19 have been in cybersecurity. Work for Fortune 10, Fortune 100 companies leading their entire cybersecurity teams globally. Before I started BluSapphire, we're a one-stack platform.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. So what are we going to talk about today? From an agenda perspective, we're going to do some introductions, pretty much done with that. Session overview, we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about, right? And get into the meat of it. And then I ask some questions to the panelists, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. If you have questions, please enter them into the Q&A box. You'll see a link to the Q&A box, and just enter your questions and we'll try to answer them real time or save them for the end. And then we'll do we'll go around and do some closing remarks, and then I'll have some announcements. So to kick it off, basically the newest results from the audit that IBM does, or the report that IBM and Ponemon Institute does on the cost of a data breach, $4.5 million. That's today what the cost of a data breach is. That's significant. It's a increase over last year. I think we'll see an increase every year, basically, because costs are going up. But $4.5 million, 51% of organizations are planning to increase security investments as a result of a breach. About half, right? What this study is showing is that if you act now, you could save yourself about $1.76 million down the road. So what do you guys think about that?
Well, like you say, this is going to be increasingly profitable because people are making money off of these attacks, and cryptocurrency allows them some degree of anonymity. So it's, I'm glad that, earlier this year, I think it was in April, the White House hosted leaders from all over the world to discuss the issues of data breaches and ransomware attacks and things like that. So I'm glad that the global community is looking more at the totality of the situation rather than looking at it as, United States, because these are transnational events that we're dealing with. So I'm hoping that people aren't thinking just about relying on, well, if there's a problem, insurance will cover it. But, lock the doors and windows to the house first, rather than put yourself and your company through the stress of dealing with one of these breaches. I don't care. What do you think?
You're muted.
No, I was just saying, I totally agree with Rosa there. And the cost of breaches have been increasing for the past decade. Now it has become more easier and faster and real with ransomware. Previously, it was like, companies got breached, nobody knew about it, but the new data notification, breach notification laws across all the states in the United States and many other countries are bringing it into the limelight. And more organizations are starting to strengthen up and see how they can bolster their security beforehand and after the fact. That's where you're seeing the rise that, 51% of the organizations do it post-breach. It used to be like 90% of the organizations always did it post-breach. Nobody ever bothered about security before. That thought process has changed. And now with more and more regulatory authorities holding boards accountable, that thought process has changed and investments into security are flowing. So it's really time to strap up and see where you're going. I mean, insurance won't cover. Standard of due care is expected both by the courts and insurance. So majority of the cases, you may not get proper coverage from your insurance. And the kind of breach expense that is going to grow is not just in terms of dollar, but also in terms of reputation. And reputational damage to your organization is almost irrecoverable, especially in the medium enterprises. And that's something that your insurance won't and cannot cover ever.
Cool. Yeah, I think on the positive side, like all the governments, there are people getting involved, more involved than ever in this, and I think it's based on how serious the problem is, right? So presidents of countries are stepping up and saying, "Hey, I'm going to issue an executive order," or federal organizations in the U.S. at least are mandating compliance requirements and regulatory requirements. So I think that's good. And around the world, we see this happening, right? So there's that part's cool. But, one thing I'll note is that insurance companies, people are still saying, I'm not worried about it. My insurance company is going to pay for it anyway, right? Not today, they won't. Insurance companies are motivated to find a way to not pay. It's interesting from that perspective as well. These stats I liked. It's a little bit of an eye chart and a little hard to read, but cybersecurity is way up, right? And there were in 2021 there were 1,600 plus events, cybersecurity events, and a number of those were based on phishing. So today, these studies are a little difficult to work with, right? Because business email compromise is treated separately, but it usually starts off as phishing, right? That's how they lure you into providing your credentials. So maybe you can reflect a little bit on that. But there's phishing has always been a big thing. Social engineering in general is always been a big area of concern, I think, for companies. What do you think about that?
Problem too is that with business email compromise, it's vastly underreported. And the FBI has said they think there are a lot more cases of business email compromise that go untold because, as Kiran pointed out, the concept of the reputational damage that occurs when news like this gets out. And it's interesting. I was looking on social media a couple of days ago in one of the tech groups I'm involved in, and an administrator said, and it kind of shocked me. He or she said something to the effect of, "Well, if they can't use my own domain, et cetera, to spoof the user." And I explained that they're not going to necessarily try and take over KnowBe4.com, BluSapphire.com, ASMGi.com. They're going to buy a number of domains that are near identical to that.
Right. That look like
KnowBe and then capital A instead of 4 or something like that. So they're going to buy something that looks very similar, and you've got tiny text on your screen, and an untrained user with an untrained eye that's very busy is going to miss that, and they're going to click on the link, or they're going to, you know, they're going to succumb to the methodologies that social engineers use, like urgency techniques. If you think the CEO is saying, I'm in Europe right now, wire, you know, $300,000 to me immediately, I'm in dire need of it, you know, you're going to jump unless you've been trained to pick up the phone and call and confirm it's actually your CEO. But it's things like that where I think a lot of folks that are running the systems aren't thinking about it from the hacker's perspective. And they think that, well, how could they possibly get in my domain? Well, it's not about getting in your domain. It's about spoofing what looks like your domain and just sending an email. It's much easier than I think a lot of people attribute it to be.
And totally agree with Rosa there, right? And a lot of us, especially who've been spending time in information security for a while, are well aware of these threats. We know how to actually identify a phishing attack. Well, even we can make mistakes, but the point I'm trying to make here is majority of your users are consuming this on their mobile phones. Yes. And it becomes that much harder to identify a phishing attack and identify the header of an email or probably message from your phones. And when you're starting to look at it from a consumer perspective, where 90% plus above are consuming it using their phones, the picture becomes a lot clearer, right? I mean, it's very easy to attack somebody. It's very hard for us to figure out what are the data headers, how do I identify what is the original email address, all of that on your phone. And that's where majority of the attacks are getting successful. Yep. And let's not forget, it is actually not a technology problem. It's very little about technology. It's more about human psychology, right? And that's where the training, awareness training, and all of that's come into picture, because the technology can only go so far when it comes to social engineering. It's really, really drilling down the messaging constantly, understanding how the attackers are working, educating your user base that this is more of a psychological attack rather than a technological attack. Technology just happens to be the transport on how this is being accomplished. But phishing attacks have existed for as long as humans existed.
Right.
Well, and it's interesting too. I'll tell you the story about, I had a conversation with the CIO of a CISO of a Fortune 100 company that will remain nameless. And he was just bragging about the DMARC system they had set up. So the email authentication system, the flavor was DMARC in this case. And you know how security awareness training and security culture and educating your end users was a waste of money because he had this fancy setup. And again, having a hacking background and having that CIA mindset, I'm sitting there thinking he's missed the boat, because for all of that, it kind of reminds me of that scene in Star Wars when he says, you know, this technological, you know, this great technological thing you've built with this Death Star, don't get too impressed with yourself. It was kind of like one of those circumstances, because I said to him, all right, so let's say there will be no phishing, no malicious emails that get through your email authentication system. Okay, let's just say 100% it's going to work. It's been perfectly implemented. I said, and again, from a hacker perspective, I said, do you allow your users to access any sort of personal accounts, whether it's webmail or LinkedIn, things that most companies do allow for? You might not allow for Facebook, you might not allow for Instagram, but a lot of companies do allow for webmail or LinkedIn at least access. And he said, yes. And I said, so what I'm going to do from a hacker perspective is I'm going to get to know your users, preferably your users that have a lot of permissions on the system. So that might be C-suite, that might be an executive assistant to the C-suite, might be someone in your IT department, someone in HR. I'm going to get to know them. I'm going to build a profile based on what I see about them. And I'm going to like what they like, and I'm not going to like what they don't like. And I'm going to make best friends with them online. And I might take weeks, if not months, to do this. But when I do, I'm going to make sure that during the hours of 9 to 5, when I know I've got their trust, between 9 to 5, when I know they're on that network, I'm going to send them a link to an article about, hey, your new favorite band, or here's some news about your favorite hobby, whatever. Send a malicious link. They're going to be logged into LinkedIn or their webmail, and they're going to click on it. And I'm going to completely circumvent your fancy email authentication system. Why? Because you didn't train your user to suspect the attempted social engineering attack. And 24 hours later, he was talking about getting security awareness training and security culture training for his company. Because they don't think about, there's 3 legs to the stool. There's hardware, there's software, but there's the end user. And that's the third part that we as tech people, we don't think about that, the human firewall concept. And we need to be doing more of that.
Awesome. That's a great story, Rosa. Yeah, appreciate you telling it. I want to get to this topic. I think it's a valid question, and like the traditional equation for risk is likelihood times impact. Risk equals likelihood times impact. Everybody knows that. Everybody who's in cybersecurity knows that. That is the traditional equation. But I'll say a more complex version of that is breaking likelihood into threats times vulnerabilities. And that's good. And I'll say another version of that changes the equation a little bit, but it doesn't really change the equation. But I'll say it's more meaningful to me, at least. Means plus motivation times opportunity times business pact divided by controls, right? Whatever you've put in place for controls. What I wanted to ask the panel is, what do you think is the best equation for risk? Your thoughts?
Here.
Say again?
Yeah. So yes.
Sapphire is a great answer.
It largely depends, I think, on how well you understand the business you are in, right? And that becomes relatively very important for a security professional as we start talking about the risk to the organization, not necessarily the threats to the organization, because risk is more widely understood by senior management, board, and others. So as you're translating this data into risk, you need to understand the business you operate in and what each of these mean to you, right? Yes, likelihood times impact is a very, very simple example, and it was made because techies like us understand it very, very easily. But you start drilling down into what the likelihood is going to be and understand what that impact is going to be and what it means for your business, then the complexity of that, breaking down each of these values, becomes very important. So yeah, I don't think it really matters what equation you use. There are multiple, there are multiple frameworks for this, but really figuring out a way to understand risk is critical.
Yep. I like the last version because it includes, not that everybody does it right? Because I've talked to a lot of companies who are so focused on controls, like they just move from one project to the next project, putting in controls to meet some kind of compliance requirement, right? Whether it's ISO 27001 or various different other things. But the reason I like the last equation is because it includes controls. And I'll make a comment about cyber insurance. Cyber insurance used to not worry, like the company that made zero investment in security would get the same rate for a policy as the company who made a tremendous investment in security. And that just doesn't make any sense. I think today insurance companies are trying to understand risk a little better, but I like the fact that they include an inverse relationship to the controls. Like if you make an investment in control, you should get credit for that, right? For doing something. Today it's MFA, tomorrow it'll be something else. Zero trust, I think we're going to talk about a little bit later, but that's a big thing. Zero trust is, and I'll say most people probably don't understand it, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
At KnowBe4's annual convention, I hosted a panel, and there was a gentleman in the audience, and I wish I remembered his name, but talking about risk and insurance. And he said, the way I have been able to ensure that I have the money and the resources for security, for managing the risk, for controls, for compliance, is well, probably good I don't know his name in the company because I wouldn't attribute this quote to him anyway, but he said he literally looked for the insurance policy that had the most requirements for compliance, controls, and risk built into it. So then he had to go to management and say, look, our insurance requires we do this, so I need the funding for it. Mm. And so it's, we always kind of hear those jokes about managing up, but I thought that was a brilliant strategy, because if you're strapped for cash, because we're always pleading for more funding, right? Of course. But if you have the ability to find an insurance provider that makes those, and I think we would all agree, very valid requirements. I'm sure that it wasn't, you as a requirement, free coffee for everybody or something ridiculous like that. I mean, I'm sure it was, again, controls, compliance, security culture, etc. I think that's a great way to handle the situation, because it's more of compliance and paperwork, so legal's going to back you. Once that paperwork has been signed, there has to be follow through. So I thought that was a brilliant strategy.
Awesome. Yeah, very smart. I've talked to a lot of people who say the best way to get money for cyber. Well, one person said the best way to get money for cyber is to be attacked, right?
Thinking like, that's that's like, where that quote was headed, but it's
Anyway.
I like what you're saying, Steve. It's the best time to get way to get money, but probably not the best time to get money.
Right.
Go the insurance route, not the wait to get attacked because your life is going to be miserable in the cleanup process afterward route. So yes.
Right. I like this because these are specific recommendations to employees or to security professionals or leadership in security. And I wanted to ask you guys if you agree with these, but a couple of them I'm going to read. So the recommendations to employees: verify an email sender's domain. We've already talked about like how spoofing can happen with a domain, right? You make it look very, very similar, but just change something about it, right? And those domains are probably available, but even if it's not available, it doesn't cost very much. So analyze the message contents and tone. Creating a sense of urgency is a big deal for the bad guys, right? So I would say the bad guys always try to create a sense of urgency, like you have to do it now, or you want a contest, or I'm on a trip in Europe and I need cards now. Right.
Social engineers use the same sort of tools that advertisers and marketers and storytellers use, right? So whether it's urgency or belonging or anything else, but that's again where your end user security culture training comes in. So and
it's because it's based on psychology, right? So it's the psychology of the buyer, and it's very good. Avoid clicking on unexpected links. Never send sensitive information out. So, I'll say this about my company. My employees are very well versed in what to look for. I get spammed constantly, multiple times per week, easily. I probably business email compromise. There were people that, send an email from Microsoft and ask me to enter my credentials and all those things. Anyway, I don't even bother with them, but my employees don't either, right? So they know what to look for, and that's truly creating a culture of security. I think if people know what to look for, which is really hard to do. Recommendations for security leaders: make data-driven, goal-oriented business decisions, leverage high-quality training content, adapt training initiative for continuous education. I think that's important, and maybe you can speak to that a little bit, Rosa. Like adapting content for the time of year, like we're entering the holiday season.
Sure. Well, it's again, it's the methods of storytellers and marketers, right? So every year around April, the bad folks are going to be sending out tax-related email. At the holidays, they're going to be sending out, free Amazon gift card type things. So it's all very. There are seasonal as well as other types of social engineering events. And they come in waves because they're putting folks on blast for a lot of these. There are automated phishing kits that you can lease on the dark web. So they can do these things in massive bursts and doing things based on certain occasions like Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, tax day. Anything along those lines. It makes it easy because when you're fishing in bulk, when that net is cast that wide, you're very likely to get some sort of a result, unfortunately. So that's, again, part of the security culture aspect. I was talking literally just last week to a former CIA colleague of mine. And I said, I never appreciated my very first week at CIA. In 2006, I was sitting in one of the training rooms at headquarters, and I looked up on the wall, and there was a computer screen. And now this is 2006, so it's like the big CRT screen, not a flat screen, and it looked like an IBM PS2 keyboard. And it looked like a dating site from someone named Svetlana, and she was saying sweet things to the end user. And then said, know who you're talking to on the internet, because the person sitting at the keyboard was an older, bearded, white-haired man with glasses on, pretending to be Svetlana. And I didn't appreciate it at the time, but I certainly do now. Like that very first week, from week one, we were being trained on security culture and good cyber hygiene in 2006. So the sooner you can start that, I call it having a healthy sense of paranoia, the sooner you can start that sort of security cultural awareness, the better off. And look, your users are going to be better off. It's not just 9 to 5, because as Kira was saying, like we're doing so much of our work on our phones. And if they're not company issued phones that are locked down, so they can't install all kinds of things on it, then you don't know what third-party vendors have malicious software potentially in apps they've downloaded from Google Play or the Apple Store, because there have been a number of documented cases of some of those apps having data that will exfiltrate information off, that will have malicious software embedded in the app, exfiltrating data off your phone. So it's important that that they get that training, keeping in mind the phone, or if they're working in the evenings and remoting in from their personal computer, they're a target then as well as they are in the workplace.
Great information.
The job of the attacker is getting easier by the day. Yeah, with large language model evolution of AI, right? This job is getting easier for the attacker and harder for the consumer or the victim, right? We'll have to understand that LLMs, the way the language was phrased in an email, how personalized it made it, played a big role in identifying whether it was a phishing attack or not just the URLs and other stuff, right? Now that actually has become a lot more easier with the large language models like ChatGPT and Google Bard and the others into the picture. You can create these templates in seconds and phish anybody you want. And whatever little information you have about them, they can actually paraphrase it specific and target your CEOs and target your executives, your accountants, more often your accounts payable folks, very with minute specific data that is very relevant to them. So one of the things we do at BluSapphire during onboarding also is that we showcase the training on awareness and also showcase how easy it is to build a profile on their own personal name and do that via ChatGPT in a matter of seconds. That's where the penny drops for most folks, and that's when they realize that how easy.
I should send my kids over, Kira. You could trade them, yeah.
Well, and to build on what Kiran was just saying, there was an instance a couple of months ago, I think it was in the state of Arizona, a mother's whose, I think, high school age, I think, daughter was on like maybe spring break, something like that in Mexico. So the mother receives a phone call and from a number she doesn't know, but it's her daughter screaming and crying for help, saying, "I've been kidnapped. They're demanding ransom. Mommy, please help me." And then the supposed kidnappers get on the phone and start requesting money. And of course they want a money transfer. Well, all of this was AI. Her daughter was completely fine. But some of these new systems now that are available to everyone, they can sample our voices. And, at some point they'll be able to mimic the video. This is part of why that writers or the actors strike is going on in Hollywood, the ability for AI to mimic human faces. So it's going to be important for us sooner than later to think about, just because it sounds like my spouse or my child on the other end of the phone, do I know it's really them? And then at some point, even if it's video, because it's AI, we're going to have those same questions. What we need to do, and this is from my CIA training, is we're all going to have some kind of very secret
to know something,
phrase, phrase, secret word, something like that, to exchange with your loved ones to know whether or not it's in fact them. I mean, and we're going to get there. We're already there with the voice. Obviously, that's been documented in that particular case. We're going to be there soon when it comes to video as well.
I'm going to move on, but these are great stories. That's a great story, Rosa, and I think it exemplifies the challenge, right? And to your point, Kiran, it's never going to get easier, right? It's always going to get harder. And we're going to move on to some panelist questions, and I have several, and we'll start with you, Kiran. What's the benefit of MDR?
Well, look at the evolution of where we have been as technology and organizations started to grow. The remote compute is growing, endpoint compute is growing. We used to be very centralized and data center specific. And we have grown into more hybrid cloud approach, whether you're doing part of the compute in your own data center, part of it on your own laptop, and some of it in the cloud. The visibility for the security becomes very challenging. You really need to understand what's happening on your machine, on your data center, in the cloud. Bring all of these components together and try to understand whether something that's happening is anomalous activity within your organization, or it's actually a regular business operations, or it's actually an ongoing attack. And getting visibility to that is something what an MDR provider would do for you. This is basically effective management, analysis, and response on EDR tools that you currently have.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to consider, and to Kiran's point, is there's such a hodgepodge of apps and tools, And some of these tools are not easy to use. You kind of need a PhD level understanding of some of them. So a way to, and when we say MDR, just to make sure everyone understands, it's managed detection and response, right? So, and I think those sorts of solutions that can consolidate and streamline those responses are, especially in a SOC situation where time is of the essence, and you've got an intrusion that's perhaps weaving ransomware through your system. The faster you can resolve and mitigate, obviously, the better.
Yep.
And this is what
of
we're
the-
seeing, right?
I-
The market.
Sorry.
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I just wanted to add a point here. A lot of the medium enterprises are starting to move away from building their own expertise because the lack of skill availability in the market is very well known and well documented, well discussed point. And the capability for every organization to build their own cyber warrior team is extremely hard. And having a center of excellence, if you will, and a subject matter expertise view, manage all of this for you, it actually becomes that much more important. And this is where MDR providers are starting to gain traction.
Yep. I was going to add, one of the things I always tell customers, basically, or prospects, is that it's like ground cover. MDR is like ground cover. It's
That's the perfect way to put it. Yeah.
There's always somebody watching, and the metaphor I always use is liken it to, we've all seen this on TV, like the person that breaks into a museum and steals a gem out of a trophy case or whatever. There's all these infrared lights, and you have to be acrobatic to avoid them, right? Most people are just plow right through. And I liken that to tripping an IOC. If you trip, an alarm's going to go off somewhere, and the MDR company is always going to know, right? Because they're always watching, and there are specific indicators of compromise. IOC stands for indicators of compromise, and there are a lot of them, but they're very specific things, right? If you're going to do this, and then do this. Follow a recipe, 1, 2, 3, 4, or sequence of steps, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Statement. Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I think that the 24/7 eyes on glass is paramount to understand, and the rest of the stuff is all true. There is a shortage of talent in cybersecurity, and an overwhelming feeling because there's so much available, right? So I always say I wouldn't want to be a buyer today, but I am a buyer. Right? So we have to make intelligent decisions. It's challenging because there's so many options today for buyers. And anyway, that's one of the things that I think. Do you want to reflect on anything additional, or?
I defer to Kiran.
You're muted, Kiran.
No, I think you've touched on it very well.
Cool. The next question is, what's the story on security awareness training today? Right, there's a lot of. I just read an article I think earlier this week about don't train your people. I still think it's important to train your people, but this article, the purpose of writing this article was don't train your people because you can't win, right? You're going to get attacked anyway, no matter. Like, people always click on links, right? So I think the context was the psychology of buying. People are always going to fall for social engineering, right? So, but I know from experience that you can create a culture of security. So what do you think, Rosa?
Well, I kind of goes back to that story about the Fortune 100 company, right? So it assumes that the technology end is the end all and be all. And it's not a panacea. Having worked for an organization that conducted human intelligence, my job was to target individuals from a hacker perspective. And it takes less time, like just purely from a hacking view, it takes less time to hack the individual, the end target as a person, than it does often to gain access into a well-secured system. So it will, takes less time for me to tailgate through a front door and drop a Raspberry Pi that I've got set up as a listening post on the network than it would be for me to try and access remotely. So because that's the other thing is secure. It's not just about cyber, because we can't separate physical and cybersecurity. Those things are one and the same, because physical access can easily enable facilitating a cyber operation. And social engineering comes into play in those circumstances as well. Well, how do you prevent that happening? Well, you prevent it from happening from having the training and implementing a security mindset throughout your organization. So that's my long-winded diatribe.
Great. I'm going to move on just in the spirit of time, but because I really want to get through these things. But what about automation? Like I've heard a saying that, like, big companies, public traded companies, they have to please the analysts, right? Because they have conference calls with analysts, and they're probably not going to grow a lot. But the emphasis today is on like automating and increasing profit levels. I'll say loosely, right? What do you think about automation in general and that comment? Go ahead.
I think automation is key, right? It is inevitable. Businesses have been adopting automation from the industrial age, and the economy has moved forward. So I think this is a wave that is going to continue to happen. And as the capabilities of artificial intelligence increase, we're going to see more and more automation come in. Where human factor will come in is decision-making capabilities that some of these artificial intelligence lack context, and that context can be brought about by the humans. But definitely automation is going to increase. And there's a lot of mundane activities that, like some of the triage, some basic response capabilities can be done using automation, which dramatically reduces the time spent by security analysts in trying to understand a particular activity, whether it is a security incident or it's actually something to do about a regular business activity, right? So the context is important, and as long as we see context clearly, I think automation makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, from a security perspective, anything that's going to improve the reaction time to any sort of incursion or data infiltration, I think that's hugely significant. I mean, there are broader contexts when it comes to automation and AI that are kind of off topic. I do think it's going to sooner than later have interesting and challenging impacts on certain portions of the workforce. But from a purely cybersecurity perspective, again, when you're in the SOC, when you're in the Security Operations Center, time is of the essence. So as much automation as can be had to triage the incident, the better off the organization writ large. We don't want that breach to happen.
Cool.
And just picking up where Rosa left off, right? It's really what cyber resilience of your organization is defined as, right? The faster you can detect, the faster you can analyze, respond, and remediate the problem, get back on your feet. That is defined as your cyber resilience. And automation definitely plays a key role in that area. Awesome.
Yeah, time is critically important in cyber events. There's no question, or incidents. So we try to prevent them from becoming we try to prevent events from becoming incidents. But how about AI? how are you using it today? Are you using it, or how are you using it?
We are using it. We're building out our AI portal internally. We're using it just to help build efficiencies in the business process. I mean, we do have AI built into our aspects of our platform as well. And again, that's for a lot of the sort of modeling and mimicking of threat actor behaviors and things along those lines. So it's really baked into most of the cakes at this point. I don't think if you don't have it integrated into your systems, I don't know that many companies that are really evolving aren't looking at how they can be doing that, especially when we see, look at the money that it's not just we know Google and we know Microsoft, but Apple's been pouring a ton of money into AI as well. So it's the way of not the future, but it's the way of now. So I think if organizations, particularly in cybersecurity, in the cybersecurity realm, aren't looking at how it can benefit their platform, then they're already behind the 8 ball.
What about you, Kiran? Are you using it now, or?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of us miss the point on what is AI really, right? And then we've been using it in some shape or form in terms of so the machine learning languages that we used before, in how we were actually evolving into hybrid machine learning models, which generate and make decisions for you at machine speed. AI brings, especially for me, AI actually is more about recognition of patterns, which machine learning models do for a quite large amount of time, and we've been playing with that. We do obviously use both components, and currently we are largely looking into how we can take a security operations center's feedback into decision-making process and make the decision-making and triage much faster and more efficient for the analysts. But at the same time, I think AI will start playing a key role in cybersecurity, both from a defender and attacker perspective. Attacker, I think we have discussed how the LLMs and the others are actually enabling attackers to target specific segments, specific verticals, specific victims. But on the defense side, I think AI is going to start building models around internally of what your attack surface looks like at any given point of time. And attack surface monitoring today being largely manual or point in time, and AI, I think, will start changing that and being able to allow you to defend yourself in real time rather than a reactive mode that we are in today. Right? A lot of AI today is revolving around how do I do faster triage, how do I do faster detection. But I think artificial intelligence will start to play around as to how do I understand more artifacts from the attacker by standing up a simulated environment for the attacker to play in and gather more IOCs and understand where his attack vectors are and defend against that in real time. So if you're not already looking into this, like Rosa said, you're already behind the 8 ball, but I think largely most organizations have caught up. But there's some challenges with AI, especially in the LLM models today, as to defining and how do we protect privacy of the consumers without violating the privacy. How do we define the parameters into which these AI models should operate on? That is still something that is actually we're looking very closely on. And I think that will be the next way of AI, is where you can actually control the models with defined parameters to stay within their lanes, if you will, especially when it comes to organizations and service providers. You want, or the consumers will want, organizations will want the service provider not disclose any of their information or not use it in conjunction with any of their competitors or any other markets. So that's something that actually will start to get defined more clearly within AI. And that's something that, as BluSapphire, we're working on defining those lanes and keeping those LLM models clear. What this also enables in the defender side, on the security analyst, is that security is a very high specialized skill right now. And I mean, somebody posted a question which I responded to, is that, I see a lot of job applications. Yes, you see a lot of job applications. It's not the problem of people, it's a problem of skill. The skill required to actually be able to work with data that you currently have is the one that is actually challenging. And I think AI is going to solve that skill problem and make it more easily consumable, whereby it opens up more opportunities for less skilled people to act and behave at a very high skill. Look at what Copilot has done, Microsoft Copilot has done for development, and GitHub Copilots have done for development, where they're able to develop much faster and code much faster than what was possible in real time before. These things will actually start building up in the cybersecurity space also, where a level 1 analyst will start being able to emulate the capabilities of a level 2 analyst, and level 2 analysts will also start being able to emulate the capabilities of a level 3 analyst. These are the areas of competence that we think AI is going to have significant impact on.
Well, and I think about it from an attacker or hacking perspective. Again, sooner than later, AI is going to be able to, you admit, we're talking about the issues of privacy. There's an ecosystem. There's over 750 data vendors out there, data brokers out there that build profiles on us based on our internet activity, what websites we use, what we purchase, things like that. So AI is going to be able to build, we talk about sending phish emails in bulk. AI is going to be able to build profiles of us in bulk and do that social engineering work, and not just on behalf of hackers, but nation state capabilities, because we know North Korea, China, Russia, they are constantly going after organizations for their intellectual property, for ransomware attacks, for funding. In the case of North Korea, they're going to be leveraging artificial intelligence to target your workforce to do what hackers are doing by hand right now. So again, there are a lot of pluses to it, but as an offensive tool, there's going to be a point where, calling back to that story about the woman whose daughter had been, quote unquote, kidnapped, those things are going to happen at a much faster and a more automated rate.
Yep.
And again, we have to be aware as a society, as a global society, about the threat that this can pose to not just our employers, but to our loved ones as well. So it's, again, I'm always about talking about, let's start training our children, because I see 3-year-olds with tablets, and we need to make sure kids and our seniors are as well-trained in cyber hygiene as the rest of us, because this is about to become, not to get Skynet about it, but this is about to become a mass enabler of social engineering attacks.
Yep. I think it's important to note, like, whatever the good guys have, the bad guys also have, right? So anyway, if you're a good guy, you tend not to think about bad things, right? Anyway, it's interesting that the bad guys are going to have the same tools. What about zero trust? Like, we've seen a lot of the leadership that you mentioned during the introduction, that were, I'll say, more focused on security today, have mentioned zero trust. What is it? Guys, please comment.
Kiran, I defer to you on, I think BluSapphire is the great place to start.
Sure. So, a lot of us veterans who have been around for over 25 years have known zero trust before in terms of mandatory access controls that we used to use a long time ago, pioneered by US Defense at that time. But the systems have evolved, the compute has evolved, the devices have evolved. Now, as that evolution went through, Mac also became zero trust. But essentially, we're going into a mode to say, I don't trust the device you're coming from. I don't trust you until you prove to me who you are. So I'm not going to open up anything, and I need trust at every single layer. Today, most of our organizations rely on trust either based on username, password combinations, or trust based on an entire network where based on a single piece of validation, you're trusting the entire resources of the organization with that user. So there's a lot of components to zero trust architecture. There's a network layer, there's a application layer, there's an identity layer. But in short, trust at every level. That's really what we're going after. And on a lighter note, in God we trust, everybody else bring proof. That's what we're really going after with respect to zero trust. So people do and have access to what they just need access to, nothing more than what the minimum access that they need. And we have inherent trust built into every layer of communication, every layer of compute that we are working with. That's really, in a nutshell. Zero trust can itself be a 2-hour-long webinar, but in short, that's where
I agree. Yeah, that's a great definition.
Don't hand out permissions to everybody, but I think zero trust sounds better. So yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Well,
it's compartmentalization. That's what we call it in the intelligence community. But at the end of the day, it's you only need access to what you need access to do your job and not one step further.
Yep. And I agree with Kiran. We could do an entire webinar on zero trust. But what I know from cybersecurity is the saying used to be trust but verify, and the saying now is don't trust anybody. That's what zero trust is really all about. Any closing remarks? Go ahead, Rosa.
So no, I mean, I think I don't know, gosh, we've covered a lot. So I think there's I always go back to there's hardware, there's software, there's your end user. So you've got to take into account all of those aspects. And then I think, and Kiran can speak to kind of the speed with which reaction to incursion or defense and automation is so necessary.
Awesome.
Absolutely. It's building on what Rosa said, people, process, and technology, right? In that order in most cases. Unfortunately, we tend to look at technology, then process, then people, but really do focus on people also. And the faster you can actually detect threats, the faster you can respond and remediate, as defined as cyber resilience, and that's really what you should be focused on. And a lot of this is not really very hard and doesn't have to come at huge expense. Know what you're doing, and I think you can budget accordingly. Security is hard, but really is a lot more about understanding your current environment, understanding your current business.
Well said.
My closing remarks would be that most people don't understand their current environment, right? And or risks in general. And I think it's important to take a risk-based approach to everything, right? So think about everything critically and everything risk-based, and look again. That's because there's probably something that you haven't considered yet. And
especially if you've been in an organization that's been through a lot of like mergers and acquisitions, I see that all the time. 1000%, they don't really know their inventory.
Yep. Awesome. Let's get to. I'm going to skip over events and we'll get to some audience questions. We don't have much time. I think we're out of time actually, but I'm going to do some questions anyway. Let's see What cybersecurity measures should an organization consider to enhance the security of its digital assets?
Encryption at rest and in motion. I mean, here's the 3 most basic things that are the constant mistakes that I see. So they're not patching and updating their systems. That happens all the time. They're allowing users to reuse passwords that have been breached from other user accounts, they're using the same password on their network as they're using for their banking account, and that gets breached. It's on the dark web. That's not even hacking. Go on the dark web, get a breached account, start trying it around. So they're not patching all their systems. Sometimes it's that inventory issue. They're allowing users to reuse passwords. And again, they're not training for social engineering. Those are the 3 easiest and most frequent ways that any attacker is going to get in. And it continues to happen over and over and over. If you can solve those 3 parts, then you can focus on your security stack, the automation, the response, the things that Kiran talks about, that's his area of expertise. Like, that to me is the kind of the foundational solution.
Any thoughts? Ryan?
No, I think spot on, right? You really get your foundation right, and you can build all the fancy stuff on top of it. I don't mean fancy with any kind of disrespect. All the advanced stuff that you want to build automation, you want to build. Majority of the people I've seen when SOAR became a big thing, everybody was going after SOAR vendors. And you actually don't know what exists in your environment before you even go to a SOAR vendor, right? I mean, you start building your playbooks, and then you realize, okay, I have playbooks now, but I don't have anybody to execute, neither the tools, nor the understanding of what these playbooks are actually going to deliver to me and what is involved in building that. So understand your environment. And this been said in multiple times by multiple people, but I'm going to repeat it. Your SANS critical 20 controls and critical 10 controls, they're so foundational. They're probably 30 years old or 20 years old, and they're still so relevant at many, many layers. I can't believe how many environments we get into where the basic question of inventory still remains a challenge. You'll never be able to patch fast enough. Let's not even start heading down that path. I think we have tried for as long as computers existed. That's not a path you're going to gain victory on. That's something you're only going to manage risk at, and you will still always have some residual risk. With that residual risk, try to understand how good your resilience is. How quickly can you identify when that vulnerability is exploited or when something is happening, and how quickly can you turn that around and keep your CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability triad going. That's really what matters at the end of the day. And I think that's what your board also wants you to focus on.
Yep. I'm going to pull up one more question, and I'll make the comment that we have a lot of questions. If we don't get to it on the call, and we're already over time, so we're going to do one.
They can also write down our names, reach out to us on LinkedIn, right? So
Yep. I think this is a great question. It involves incident response plans. How can organizations create comprehensive incident response plan to address and recover from security breaches effectively?
Incidentresponse.com. I think there's a very good open initiative going on at incidentresponse.com to build a lot of these playbooks, incident response plans, incident response tabletop exercises for organizations to look at and adapt and use it in their own organizations. I think.
Can you say that domain again?
I think it's incidentresponse.com.
Awesome.
Or incident-response.com. I can actually pull that up. Another
website I would recommend is attack.mitre, M-I-T-R-E, mitre.org. That's a knowledge base that is globally accessible, that provides information on threat models, things like that. MITRE is an organization that is very involved in depth on the cyber defense side. And they have a lot of great free tools and PDFs on playbooks, if you will, on incident response and threat preparedness, things like that.
Yep. And I will say, shameless plug, ASMGi can help if you need an incident response plan. We can put it together for you, or with you, I should say. But in any event, there's a lot that goes into an incident response plan. It's very complicated. So leverage somebody who knows what they're doing or who has done it before. Don't just copy it blindly and change the name.
There are a lot of dependencies in those circumstances, and every organization's a little different in terms of like legal compliance issues, SEC requirements, things like that.
Yep. Yeah. we're way over on time, so I'm gonna say goodbye now. And thank you so much for being here, guys. I really appreciate it, and your wisdom is phenomenal. And we'll do it again sometime.
All right. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.